Ramon! Ramon!
Right guys, very quick one here, because the BBC and Andrew Marr need to be called out yet again. You all know at the moment I'm no fan of Boris Johnson given his actions over the past year, including his half-baked Brexit deal that has been lumped on us, but Andrew Marr, I have to say, is an utter disgrace. The way he acts over wanting more restrictions, Brexit and the SNP's independence in name only is true snivelling shitweasel behaviour. He attacks Boris Johnson for not shutting down the whole country in September until now because as a salaried BBC employee he gets paid no matter what. And the BBC, I expect, are missing them ratings from the first lockdown that broke all records for a legacy media outlet that has been declining for a decade or more. You might have all noticed those demanding lockdowns and restrictions are all safe when it comes to money and working, which the BBC shows us here once again. But it is Andrew Marr's almost gushing support of Scottish independence or vassalage to the EU that proves to everyone yet again working for the BBC makes you act like a bit of a tosspot. And even more laughable when you consider the BBC's name is supposed to be the British Broadcasting Corporation, not the Brussels Broadcasting Corporation. You would actually think Andrew Marr and the BBC would be sticking up for the British Union. Not a fucking chance, of course. But you know what? Let's take a look at a few clips from it to show you exactly what I mean.
This from afar, including in Scotland. And there are, if I am a Scottish...
Why do you say afar?
Well, Scotland's a little while away from where we're sitting now. It's 500 miles or so away.
Part of our country.
400. Well, that is my point. If I am a Scottish voter, imagine me as a Scottish voter sitting in Edinburgh or Glasgow. Maybe I voted in favour of the union in the referendum. But since then, I've seen Brexit happen, and I don't like Brexit. And I've seen the way your government's behaved over the coronavirus pandemic, and I prefer Nicola Sturgeon's version of that. And I want my country, Scotland, to leave the UK. What are the democratic tools in my hands to do that?
Well, I think that obviously the most important thing is the referendum that you had in 2014, which was a very important...
Before Brexit and before the pandemic, things have changed. And a lot of people want to leave the UK.
I mean, life moves on, things change. I don't if you're saying that you would like to have another referendum...
This Scottish voter would like another referendum,
okay, well,
and wants the Democrat... He's only got a vote. So he wants to use that vote to allow it to happen. How can they do that?
I think the only point I would make is that referendums, in my experience, direct experience in this country, are not particularly jolly events. They change things. They don't have a notably unifying force in the national mood. They should be only once in a generation. And I think that was what...
Well, we'll come to Brexit in a second. But what is different? What is different about the English wanting to leave the EU and having a referendum and being allowed to do that, and Scotland wanting to leave the UK and doing exactly the same thing? What's the difference?
The difference is that we had a referendum in 1975, and we then had another one in 2016. That seems to be about the right sort of gap.
All right.
How about that?
Let's move to Brexit. Because the OBR says 4% down on GDP as a result of Brexit. You say there's lots and lots of opportunities, and we're able to trade without non-tariff barriers or tariff barriers with the EU. But this, I'm waving lots of paper at you this morning, but this is your own government's handbook of rules for exporters to the EU. It's 159 pages of red tape and new declarations, which a lot of small companies simply won't be able to do.
Well, first of all, of course, there are going to be changes, and we've made that clear.
Looks like a non-tariff barrier to me.
We've made that clear. And actually, I think that there's a great opportunity for British SMEs and for exporters of all kinds, because now that... Why don't you pick that up and wave it again?
159 pages of bump.
Now,
red tape.
That is, of course, all that you have to do to sell around the world. And
to the EU.
And so so what we've seen is many companies in this country not exporting in the way that they could. We have fantastic companies.
Why would 159 pages of bump?
Well, where do I even start with that shit show clip we just witnessed? Andrew Marr appeared to be the SNP's party spokesman during that interview, almost kissing Nicola Sturgeon's arse, propagating this media myth that the SNP are doing better than Boris the bullshitter when it comes to the Rona. Of course, anyone with half a brain cell can see Nicola Sturgeon's actions are almost mirror steps of Boris Johnson's, because they are both cocking it up royally in every way possible by design, it would seem. But I would say the scummiest thing Andrew Marr said there is that England England voted to leave the EU, when that is not true, and Boris should have called him out on it. The UK as a whole voted in a referendum to leave. It doesn't matter how much salty EU-loving rejoiners like him cry about it. 17.4 million Brits voted to leave, and that is the end of it. And as we all know, the SNP have no argument because they agreed to a once-in-a-generation referendum back in 2014, which obviously they lost, and also the simple fact that leaving the UK would be a disaster for Scotland, something we have covered many times. They have no currency, no industry to offer the world, and a budget deficit that would require austerity on steroids to bring in line with the EU before they accepted their vassalage. The SNP spending is not sustainable outside the UK, so the Scottish people would notice the difference once the money stopped flowing north. Andrew Marr here showed himself and the BBC to be a complete bunch of clowns out of touch with reality. Boris, in my mind, should have done better shutting down his bullshit, but being piss poor appears to be a trait of Boris at this point.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors. Slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.